There is a particular kind of financial loss that never shows up on a bank statement, never triggers an alert on your phone, and never causes the kind of alarm that a market crash would. It happens quietly, predictably, and consistently, year after year, while the account balance sits there looking perfectly fine. Most people spend their entire adult lives experiencing this loss without ever recognizing it as a loss at all, because the number on the screen never goes down. It only ever stays the same or inches slightly upward, and that visual stability creates a feeling of security that is, in most real and measurable ways, a carefully constructed illusion. The concept at the center of this is something economists call purchasing power erosion, and understanding it requires separating two things that most people treat as identical: the nominal value of money, the number printed on the bill or displayed in the account, and the real value of money, which is what that number can actually buy in the world at any given point in time. A savings account preserves the first one almost perfectly. What it cannot do, and what it was never designed to do, is protect the second one. And that distinction is the entire foundation of why so many financially cautious people quietly fall behind without ever understanding why. Behavioral economists have studied this phenomenon extensively, and what they consistently find is that people are far more motivated to avoid a loss they can see than to prevent a loss they cannot. A market correction that drops a portfolio by 10% in a single week will cause genuine distress, prompt impulsive decisions, and generate real anxiety, even when the underlying companies are fundamentally unchanged and the long-term trajectory remains intact. A savings account quietly eroding 2% of its real value every year produces almost no psychological response at all, because the mechanism is invisible, the damage is deferred, and the account statement continues to display a stable or growing number. The loss is entirely real. The pain is not, and that asymmetry is exactly what makes it so persistent across generations of otherwise rational people. Inflation, at its most foundational level, is the gradual increase in the price of goods and services over time, which is simply another way of saying it is the gradual decrease in what a unit of currency can actually purchase. The US Federal Reserve has historically targeted an annual inflation rate of around 2%, which sounds almost negligible until you apply it across time and recognize that 2% compounding annually means that in roughly 35 years, the purchasing power of a dollar is cut nearly in half. A standard savings account at most traditional banks currently offers an interest rate somewhere between 0.5 and 1% annually. And even high-yield savings accounts, which represent the upper tier of what retail banks offer, typically land between 4 and 5% only during periods when the Federal Reserve has raised benchmark rates, a condition that shifts as monetary policy changes. If inflation is running at 3% and your savings account yields 1%, the real return on your money is negative 2% annually. You are not growing wealth. You are not even maintaining it. You are losing it at a measured, consistent rate while the balance gives you every visual signal that nothing is wrong. The systemic dimension of this goes deeper still. The modern banking system operates on what is called fractional reserve lending, which means that money deposited in savings accounts is not simply stored. It is lent out at significantly higher interest rates in the form of mortgages, auto loans, business credit, and personal debt instruments. The bank collects interest on those loans at rates ranging anywhere from 6 to 25% depending on the product, and in exchange it pays the depositor 1% or less. The depositor's capital is being actively deployed to generate returns for the institution, while the depositor receives a small fraction of those returns and bears none of the lending risk, a structure that is, when examined plainly, one of the most quietly asymmetric financial arrangements most people will ever participate in without realizing it. None of this means savings accounts have no function. They serve a specific and legitimate purpose as a short-term liquidity vehicle, a place to hold an emergency fund, to park capital between decisions, or to preserve money needed within the next 12 to 24 months. The problem is not the tool itself. The problem is using a short-term liquidity instrument as a long-term wealth preservation strategy, which is roughly equivalent to using a refrigerator to cook food, not because it is dangerous, but because it was designed to do the opposite of what you are asking it to do. The discomfort of watching money move through markets, experience volatility, and occasionally decline in nominal value is not evidence that those vehicles are riskier than a savings account over long-time horizons. In many well-documented cases, the data points consistently in the opposite direction. What changes for people who genuinely understand this is not necessarily where every dollar goes. It is how they define safety. Safety, redefined through the lens of purchasing power rather than nominal stability, looks fundamentally different. because it requires tolerating visible short-term fluctuation in exchange for long-term real growth, which is a trade that the human brain resists instinctively, but that decades of documented data supports consistently. The first step in that shift is simply recognizing that the absence of a visible loss is not the same as the absence of loss, and that the most expensive financial decisions are often the ones that never feel like decisions at all. If that framing changes how you think about where your money sits, subscribe to Weston Invests, because this is exactly the kind of conversation we have every week.